All right, so I'm going to do just a little short video over some of the trig functions because I know some of you guys are having a little trouble with it. So this video is only for sine and cosine. So this is the graph of sine and cosine. This is the graph of sine. So you start off at 0. So the sine of 0 is 0. Then you go to the sine of pi over 2. It is going to be 1. The sine of pi is 0. The sine of 3 pi over 2 is going to be 0. And then the sine of 2 pi is going to go back to 0. So once you get back to the original value, then you've made one complete period. And so this is what the sine function looks like. It just looks like a little wave, and it's called periodic. And so periodic means that if you were to now go from 2 pi to 4 pi, you will see this exact graph. So the period for sine of uh, theta or whatever angle uh, you can call this alpha, it doesn't matter. It's going to be 2 pi. So the period is 2 pi. So every time you increase by 2 pi, you're going to see this exact same graph. So from 2 pi to 4 pi, you will see this graph. From 4 pi to 6 pi, you will see this exactly same graph. So that's what it means to be periodic. Now the cosine looks a little bit different. So the cosine looks like this, and the cosine of 0 is going to be 1. The cosine of pi over 2 is going to be 0. The cosine of pi is going to be -1. So you can see, just like the sine function, the whole graph is squeezed between -1 and +1. And then if you look at 3 pi over 2 is going to be 0. And then pi over 2, you go back to 1. So you've completed your entire period. And the period for cosine is going to be 2 pi as well. All right, so now let's talk about because in this for this particular week, you need to know how to sketch the graph of sine and cosine. There may be some other trig functions in it, but I wanted to start out with these. Excuse me. So one of the things that you're going to be asked is how to find the period. So you always use the coefficient in front of your angle variable to determine what your period is. So in this case, you see B is in front of theta, which theta represents the angle measurement. So in order to find the period for sine or cosine, it's just going to be 2 pi over B. So here's an example. I have y is equal to the sine of 1/3 theta, where my theta, so my b is equal to 1/3. So it's just going to be 2 pi over 1/3, which gives me a 6 pi. Remember, when you divide by a fraction, you are really multiplying by the reciprocal. That's how we get 6 pi. So this is how to find the period. So you see that this is different. This has a period of 6 pi, where if you didn't have uh, the, what is our B? Our B was 1/3. If you didn't have this 1/3, in the case you just have 1, the period is 2 pi. So your period will change based off the value in front of the angle measurement. So make sure you understand that. You can stop the video at any time if you need to just rewind and take some notes or something like that. Now we're talking about the amplitude. Now the period was the coefficient inside of the particular parentheses, but if you want to find the amplitude, it's going to be the constant value that's multiplied outside of the parentheses. And so if you can see here, the amplitude is going to be the absolute value of the number that's multiplied. So this is going to be the absolute value of -10. So the amplitude for this is going to be 10. And this is something that I did mention, but if you have sine and just regular sine and cosine, right, you know the amplitude is just 1 because this is understood to be 1. And you can see that here, right? You can see a 1 and a -1. But if you were to graph this particular function, that would be a 10 and a -10. And this particular, if we were to graph it. All right, and so I also found the period. The period was the angle they're using for the angle measurement x this time. So my b is going to be 1/2. So I have 2 pi divided by 1/2. So the period of this is going to be 4 pi. All right, so lastly, we're going to talk about a phase shift for sine and cosine. And this is going to be a horizontal phase shift. And horizontal means that I'm only looking at what's inside of the parentheses to determine what a horizontal phase shift. We'll talk about a vertical phase shift in just a minute. So if we want to find a horizontal phase shift, then we're going to do -c/b. So let's look at an example for that. So we have y is equal to sine of 2 theta plus pi over 4. So your phase shift is not going to change. It's still going to be determined by the variable in front of your angle measurement. So you see that the variable in front, the number, the coefficient in front of here is 2. So in order to find my period, I'm just going to do what? I am going to take 2 pi and I'm going to divide it by 2. So my period is equal to pi. So this is the period for this function. But what I'm going to do first, so let's find the phase shift as well. So the phase shift, remember, is negative c/b. So that's where I get the -pi/4 divided by 2. So that means I'm going to shift my graph to the left pi/8 units. So that's what this means, that I'm going to shift it to the left. So I'm going to go ahead and graph the original graph. I know it has a phase shift of of pi. So it's the sine function with the phase shift of pi. So I went ahead and graphed this here. I have at 0, I have 0, pi/4, pi/2, and 3 pi/4, and 4, and then I have pi. And why do I have pi? Why is this in increments of 4s? Because remember, my phase shift is pi, right? So since my phase shift is pi, we always divide this up into 4 parts, basically. So I basically start here, and I took pi/4 and divided it by 4. So I know everything has to increase by pi/4. So this is pi/4 plus pi/4 plus pi/4 plus pi/4. So you're always going to split that up into 4. So if my period was, I don't know, let's just say 4 pi. Well, if my period is 4 pi, well, if I divide everything by 4, that means everything should increase by pi because I'm dividing 4 pi by 4. All right, so let's see what this looks like on the graph. So this is the graph y is equal to sine of 2 theta. It's here with a period of pi. But I need to take this graph and move it to the left pi/8 units. So if I'm at 0, if I go to the left pi/8 units, well, that's going to put me now at -pi/8. So that's how I get -pi/8. If I subtract pi/8 from 4/pi, that's going to give me pi/8. I'm sorry, if I subtract pi/4 minus pi/8, that's going to give me pi/8. So that's why here you see I'm going from 0 to 1. Now when I go back to 0 to get this one, I'm just going to take what? pi over 2 minus pi over 8, and that's going to give me 3 pi over 8. So as you can see, each time we're still adding pi over 4, right? So that's how and so pi over 4 is the same thing as 2 pi over 8. So that's why I go from 3 pi to 5 pi to 7 pi. So this is what that graph actually looks like. This is the graph. I just used the sine of 2 pi over, the sine of 2 pi and shifted it to the left pi over 8 units to actually get this graph. But this is the actual graph here. All right, guys, so hopefully that has been a little helpful. I know the video was kind of long, but hopefully this helps you out a little bit with some of the topics for this week. All right, guys, have a good one.